let me know. Does it move to the next slide?
Yes.
Yeah, lovely, thanks. I'm relying on my ears to tell me because I really can't see you guys here, which is probably a good thing. So the first 1001 Days movement is a group of organisations and professionals that work together to campaign for this, really. And they are really keen to look about the importance of emotional well-being of babies. And it's a cross-party kind of initiative, so all parliamentary group, really, from all the different political parties have come together because they agree that this is something that applies to everybody. It's not one party, it's actually for everybody to be aware of. And the importance of the early years will in fact impact whoever's in government, let's say. So they're all kind of joined up to do this. And it's been led by somebody called Andrea Leadsom, who you may have heard or seen on TV. She's one of the politicians. And she's also got a lot of experience in setting up parent-infant psychotherapy teams in Oxford as well. So she's a really interesting woman. I've seen her speak, and she just completely draws you in. She is amazing, actually, in all this work that she's doing. So she's definitely somebody to listen to. And I thought I'd just add a little comment here from Marmot. I don't know if anybody knows of Marmot. He did a lot of work around with Frank Fields in terms of inequalities and kind of the deprivation and the issues of all of that. So he's written a really nice quote that the foundations for virtually every aspect of human development, so physical, intellectual and emotional, are laid in the early childhood. So what happens in these early years, actually starting in the womb, has a lifelong effect on many aspects of health and well-being, from obesity, heart disease and mental health, and to educational achievement and economic status. Kind of really sums it all up really, really well. And that one. So why is it important? Why is conception to age 2 such a critical period? So we know pregnancy, birth and the first 2 years can be really tough for parents. And so some might find it really hard to provide the care and attention for their baby that, you know, in order to make a happy kind of environment. But it's also for us, it's a great opportunity to affect great change, really, just as it says there. It gives a really good critical window of opportunity. So because parents are more receptive, they want to hear what they need to do to be able to look after their baby, to be able to support and make sure everything kind of is for the best, really, as well. So it's a really good time for us to capture and work with parents. I got this from the Parent Infant Foundation. I can make it bigger because I found it hard to make it bigger on the slide. Just let me know if I'm going too fast as well, and if it needs to go bigger, I can do. They've got some really good posters, and there's a couple more coming, which are really good to be able to display in your work area or in any clinic space that you use. And hopefully people will be able to see. And it really just kind of is a really nice infographic about what is infant mental health, because how many people actually think about an infant's mental health? We think about the parents' mental health, but I'm not sure many people that I might come across would think actually infants have mental health. So this is a really good way to just make them kind of see and think about what is it, and just kind of get that conversation going. And it really just talks about being sensitive, responsive, and getting trusted relationships about in order to get good mental health with parents and caregivers as well. I won't go through all of these things because I've got a few more things further up, but it's a really, really good poster, and I'm happy to share my slides afterwards as well. So the evidence, make it just a bit smaller. So I hope you like my pictures. I was being a bit creative yesterday. I couldn't find a baby's brain, so I've got an adult brain here. Okay, so the evidence shows that if ensuring that the brain achieves optimum development and nurturing during this peak period of growth is really important. I don't know if some of you joined the session on Monday, which Karina, our psychotherapist, talked about brain development. And it was just really, really interesting. And this is just a little bit more of that, really. So from birth to 18, months, it's been calculated that connections in the brain are created at the rate of 1 million per second, which is really hard to imagine. It's huge. And so the earliest experiences shape the baby's brain development, and they have a lifelong impact. So it's laying down those neural pathways which kind of set the bar for how a child will respond later on in life, depending on how those foundations were laid in their brain at the time and those connections were made. So, for example, a pregnant mother suffering from stress can sometimes pass on this message to their unborn baby. So when they talk about it starts in the womb, this is what they mean. So the message might be to the baby that the world is dangerous, that the child and will struggle. So that's the child, he or she will struggle with many social and emotional problems. The child's response to experience of fear and tension have been set to danger and high alert. So from the womb, I think people talk about the levels of cortisols in people's bodies and the stress hormone, and actually how that passes through to the baby. So you may hear in some families about, you need to be calm, you need to look after the baby, don't get stressful because of the baby. These conversations happen, but I don't know if people really kind of get the real understanding of that, uh, the kind of longer term impacts as well. So kind of brain development can occur anytime during it's happening throughout the whole 1001 days. So whenever a baby is exposed to overwhelming stress from any cause within the family, so such as parental mental health, maltreatment, or exposure to domestic violence, it's already kind of thinking, it's already got those foundations laid to be set for high alert, and that danger is coming as well. And so if we imagine a child with that kind of response at such a young age, you can imagine as they get older, that's going to get bigger. So international studies show that when a baby's development falls behind the norm in the first few years of life, it's also more likely to fall even further behind in the subsequent years, than to catch up with those that had the better start. I think that's quite clear, really, isn't it? I think we do see that in the work that we do, in perinatal mental health and health visiting, and probably not so much maternity because they're just around the kind of birth stages and the pregnancy. And it also talks a little bit about attachment. So we know what attachment is, but it's the name given to the bond that a baby makes with its caregivers. And there's a long-standing evidence that a baby's social and emotional development is affected by their attachment to their parents. So if you think about different attachment styles that have kind of been talked about, so secure attachments, what's that? Insecure attachment. So those are what attachment is all about, and actually that then determines what might happen later on as well in life as well, looking at that attachment. And we see a lot of talk more recently about adult attachment styles as well. So I think that's relatively new, but it's also really, really interesting as well, I think, to be able to think about adult attachment styles as well, and how much that is to do with their attachment styles when they were younger, when they were babies as well. And there's lots of videos around showing children in a room, and if the parent leaves the room, and then if they come back, what the child does, or if a stranger comes in, and how they react. Really, it's really, really fascinating to see. And some people prefer to look at videos than to kind of understand what it is that we're trying to say as well. So babies are disproportionately vulnerable to abuse and neglect. So in England, there are 7 times more likely to be killed than older children. So around 26% of babies, which is approximately 198,000 in the UK, are estimated to be living within complex family situations of heightened risk, where there are problems such as substance abuse, mental illness, and domestic violence. And that's what they call the kind of toxic trio. I think you may have heard that word being used. And 36% of serious case reviews involve a baby under 1. And I remember in my safeguarding training that I remember this really kind of shocked me, that babies under 1 are more likely to be killed or injured than older children in the family as well. So, okay. This is another one of the parent, infant, baby infographics. See if I can make that bigger. Oh, this just tells you a little bit more about babies can hear from around 24 weeks, and they recognize the familiar voices at birth, and they prefer faces to other shapes. So it's indicating that babies are hardwired for relationships as well. A little bit more about the 1 million connections every second. And then also the range of research shows the way parents interact with their babies predicts their children's later development. And it's really interesting, because when I read this, I think, oh my God, did I do this right when my children were younger? And is this going to impact them later? So it can be really scary for someone to hear and see all this, because it puts a lot of pressure um, on them to make sure that everything's really, really amazing. And actually that also can potentially cause a lot of stress without realizing, because you want everything to go so well. So, it's really quite scary at times. Sometimes, even now, my kids are teenagers and I still think, oh, did I do something? And it's very easy to think that. What else? So this was interesting. So James Heckman showed that early childhood is a smart investment, and a little bit of that comes up later on as it talks about what investment the government is kind of doing to be able to address this, because the greater the investment, the greater the return as well. And then this one talked about children's development in the early years sets them on a positive trajectory. I've been saying that throughout now, really. And so children's development at just 22 months has been shown to predict their qualifications at 26 years, which is fascinating, really, because it's just extraordinary to think that you can perhaps think about what might happen so many years down the line as well. I won't go into any more of this. Let's see. Okay, some of this has come up already. Where's my slide? So I thought I would show a video just to jazz it up a bit. So I think I have to stop sharing and reopen another screen. So please bear with me. Include sound.
What do we want for our children? What's our goal? Our goal is to have productive citizens that are going to be part of thriving communities. So how do we get from here to there?
As we grow up and as we move into becoming functioning members of society, our mental health is an important part of how we perform our responsibilities as adults. Mental health can't be separated out from cognitive development and language development and kind of social competence. And they all have their roots early on in either a very sturdy or a weak foundation.
We certainly know that infants and very young children can exhibit behaviors, emotional behaviors, motor behaviors, which are predictive in certain cases of subsequent mental illness.
What are the early signs of mental health problems?
I think that when people look at children and think about mental health problems, that they have in mind often is the kinds of mental health problems that we see in adults. They're looking to see the equivalent of a depressed adult in a child, or the equivalent of a schizophrenic adult in a child. And I think that because of the nature of development, that when children have mental health problems, they just look different.
Some of the early signs of greater risk for mental health problems are usually not called mental health problems by people. They're usually called things like behavior problems, or a child who has difficulty controlling his emotions. Some of these may be early signs of what might be a mental health problem later, and some of which may be just differences among perfectly healthy children.
So, what does good mental health look like in a child?
Good mental health looks like a child who's curious and interested in the world and wants to learn and can sit and reflect at times about what's going on. It's the ability to experience love, affection, emotions, get upset when things are upsetting, and bring yourself back into levelness without needing intense intervention.
How do mental health impairments develop in early childhood?
21st century science at the molecular level is very clear that all aspects of brain function are the result of an interaction between genetics and experience. Mental illness, as most people think about it, has a very heavy genetic component. Mental health, behavior, personality, also has a genetic component, but it's much more malleable in the face of environmental influences.
Genes and experiences, as far as nature is concerned, are just different ways of setting up operating systems, brain systems, neurons.
What happens when a child experiences what we call toxic stress, severe experiences that can be damaging to its developing architecture? Those toxic experiences essentially create this unstable environment, this unstable foundation.
If sound mental health provides a foundation of stability for a child's development, mental health problems can be thought of like a wobbly table. With a child or a table, there may be many reasons for instability. Identifying which factor is causing instability is the first step towards solving the problem. So how do we restore stability to a child's mental health?
We can detect the early signs of instability. Recognizing what these signs are provides the child with the opportunity then to be placed with healthcare professionals who are trained to develop a more balanced set of skills on the emotional control side.
The prescription is to provide support for parents and in that environment in order to reduce conflict, and that in turn will lead to a reduction in dysregulated behavior in the infant and young child.
Most potential mental health problems will not become mental health problems if we respond to them early. Providing the right kinds of supports and intervention early on will reduce the extent to which this will be a potentially more serious problem later.
Okay, so did anyone have any thoughts on that video? I just found it really kind of really a snapshot really of what we're trying to say. It was really useful to have that visual picture as well, I think, to look at. So that was good. I did try and look for something a bit more UK British, but actually it was really difficult. There's so much American stuff out there. So right, I'll just go back to where we were. Does that show? Okay. So that's just that video there. So I'll just move on to a little bit about, what can we do next? What is it that we kind of need to focus on really? So we've talked about it from conception to the age 2, and the kind of need for a loving, sensitive, responsive relationship with a significant caregiver in order to teach the baby to believe that the world is a good place as well. And then reducing the risk of them having disruptive issues later on. So every child deserves an equal opportunity to lead a healthy and fulfilling life, and we want that for everybody. Hence why we do the jobs we do, really, in terms of early years work. And so with the right kind of intervention, there is every opportunity for a secure parent-infant relationship to be developed, whether this is out of concern for the individual baby's well-being or safety, or for the costs to society of poor attachment. It's imperative that how children are raised is guided and influenced by this principle and the evidence. And I think when we talked in previous sessions on maternal mental health, we talked about the cost of poor maternal mental health and the cost to society being around 8.1 billion. Hence why a lot of perinatal teams and services were kind of set up to address that, because the long-term cost to society is huge. Go to the next slide. Did that move? So getting a holistic approach from everybody, so everybody involved from around in the pregnancy, so from ante to peri, which is 20 weeks of pregnancy to around 28th day of life, is I suppose where midwifery would be the key people. And then postnatal services, such as health visitors, GPs, children's centres, perinatal teams in this, we need to be all kind of working together and seamlessly across the patch, really. And so we should all be trying to aim to engage families as soon as possible. So ideally during pregnancy. And I think that we do miss this a lot. And I think there's a lot of pressure on maternity services. And so it's difficult to potentially try and get even more services involved at that sort of stage. So there is a lot of work to do. And I say that from South West London, St George's, our patch really is that we are working to try and have some early intervention. Women, when they talk to us about their experiences, they talk from their experience from birth, actually giving birth, and then on the postnatal ward. And so actually, is there a key opportunity here to have somebody working on the wards and talking about mental health and early stages so that things don't develop later on? But that's just something I'm drifting off to that I have in my head that would potentially be a good idea. So the contact that all parents have with services before and after birth of their child is a really unique opportunity to work with them, which is, it's a stage where everything is so important to the development of that child. Specifically, vulnerable families or those experiencing difficulties should be able to access services which promote the parent-infant interaction. So, for example, video interaction guidance and parent-infant psychotherapist. So luckily in our service, we have some of our staff training to be video interactive guidance therapists. Some have had, majority of the team have had training, and about 4 people are actually working towards accreditation, and that takes about 18 months. So it is a long process, but the benefits are already being seen. And earlier in the week, Jill talked about video interactive guidance and the work that she's doing in the team with that already. And then we've also seen Karina earlier in the week, who's our parent-infant psychotherapist for Wandsworth, about some of the work that she does as well. So, we are getting there, and it's really good that things are kind of more and more services are coming in, or different interventions are available, I should say, more than services. So a range of services must be in place in every local area to ensure that parents who are at risk or suffering from mental health problems are given the appropriate support. I think there's always work to do here, but I think we have really good systems already in place. I can only really talk for our areas that we cover at the moment. And so we've got specialist parent and infant mental health midwives and specialist health visitors in mental health who are trained. And actually we have good relationships, and we do some joint work and joint sessions, which has been really quite successful in so far. So it would be good to build on these as well. Let me just move this. And then this also mentions about parents having access to antenatal classes, which address both the physical and emotional aspects of parenthood and the baby's well-being and healthy social and emotional development. So when I think of antenatal classes, or if I think back to my antenatal classes, and they may well be different now, it was all around the birth and all around about what to expect, what you should do, and that was it really. None of the other stuff came into it, and actually, you know, we're really missing a key opportunity to talk. But some people have also said actually parents aren't thinking about when the baby comes and all those other things, because they're so, you know, at that stage of just wanting to get through the birth and making sure that goes well. And so it works both ways really. I think it's quite a difficult one to get right, but I still think even if they don't take that information on board in that at that time, that they can at least take something away with them to refer to later. Okay. Oh, did my screen come off? Am I still
No, it's still
sharing?
there. Yeah,
Or
you're
is
still
it
sharing.
I've pressed something different, so I've lost my bit now. Where am I? Okay, I'm going to have to unshare so I can reshare again and find it. Sorry about that. Okay, I think that's back up now for me anyway. Another lovely infographic, which I'll try and make bigger. Where's it gone? I won't go into it too much really. It's just pretty much saying what we've talked about, but another really good poster to have around in clinic spaces. Social media is a great way to share this sort of information, because I think we know, well, from my experience, I think people, clients that we work with, families we work with, respond better to stuff that's on social media or accessible on a phone very, very quickly, rather than things being sent in the post or leaflets. So if we can get these onto social media, that would be great. But it just goes over, it's probably geared more towards parents really, telling them about investing into the well-being of their babies, what kind of things we need to do, and talking a little bit from the voice of the child here. You know, I need a secure relationship with at least one sensitive, nurturing caregiver, which is so. I shall move on to learning from other countries. I'm just going to make that smaller again. So it's not just here that people are talking about 1001 days. It's also abroad, into different countries, to see how they support families. And so the review, so this whole 1001 critical days started around 2015, and last year around September, the review of this was commissioned. And so as part of that review, they looked at what was happening in other countries. So there's a couple of examples here which would be quite interesting to share. So France has got a long established system of multidisciplinary care for mothers and young children in community centres, and they've got 5,000 of those that offer free services to all, and it has little bureaucracy as possible. Academics suggest that although effective, they are too autonomous and need greater central government control of staffing and activity standards to ensure that quality is maintained. So you can imagine if they're not if they are autonomous, they're going to be all doing different things, and actually the consistency is, you know, may be an issue. Ireland is digitising their maternity health records as part of a larger e-health strategy. Initial evaluations suggest it's been adopted and widely used, and that it is improving patient outcomes. This success has been credited to the involvement of clinicians who will actually be using the system in its design. So it's looking at what works for the people who are going to be using it as well. And then we move on to the Netherlands. So they, as in England, midwifery is an independent profession. Dutch midwives deliver primary care for most low-risk pregnancies. The system prioritises continuity of care. Studies show high levels of well-being in mothers linked in a part to continuity of care, and high levels of job satisfaction in midwives due to their feelings of autonomy. I mean, this talks a lot about actually the clinicians' views as well as the impact on families as well. And I think in part of the maternity transformation that's going on at the moment, continuity of care is really quite high up there, making sure that they are able to see the same midwife at every contact. Sure Start in New Zealand integrates information and services from pregnancy and infant care from various platforms into a single website, which would be great to be able to do that here, I think. I think there are so many different websites that we refer to. So the programme is not only beneficial to parents, but also facilitates data sharing between the governmental agency and departments, as 91% of users consent to share their information. Not quite sure how people would feel about that, because that's, you know, about governmental agencies and departments. Sometimes we do hear about people not wanting to have their information shared, or letters sent to GPs, other professionals as well. So I think there's a lot of work to be done around that. In America, they've got children's cabinets, sounds a bit scary, and early childhood councils to coordinate services and develop common outcomes. And they have been proven to be effective at increasing collaborative working, resulting in better measurement of child outcomes and better outcomes for themselves. And then in Chile, I don't know if I'm going to say this the right way, Crisi Contigo is a national Start for Life program in Chile, which has achieved significant reductions in the proportion of 2-year-old children with developmental delay. It was led by a single department focused on social development, and rapid change was made possible due to the attention from the president of Chile and general political buy-in. So, I mean, we do have that political buy-in right now in terms of this being a cross-party manifesto. So fingers crossed we can make a difference. I thought this was a really nice figure, kind of visual example of all the contacts that a family might have during their kind of young child's life. Well, this is up to 3 to 24 months is the last box there. So you can see, I'm talking about perinatal, and we come in around here in late pregnancy, 18 to 40 weeks, and we can go up to 3 to 24 months. And there is a plan for us to extend our current service from 1 year to 2 years to kind of support this. But it's got IAP services in here, primary care services, midwifery, friends and family all throughout, which is great. I just thought it was a really nice kind of picture to be able to see. And then at the bottom, the wraparound services, which is all the things around smoking cessation, drug and alcohol counselling, domestic abuse support, is all throughout as well. So it was a nice picture. And there is a reference list, so you'll be able to see where all these pictures are taken from, these diagrams. My next slide is a little bit about the impact of the virus on the 1001 days, critical days. So we know it's had a significant effect on everyone's lives, but for a whole cohort of babies born before and during the pandemic, there has been worrying repercussions for their development and well-being. And I particularly remember somebody telling me that they saw their kind of a niece or a nephew for the first time, and I think the child was coming up to 1, and it was just really quite scary. They were so used to seeing them with a mask on and stuff, and they really struggled to be able to really kind of engage the baby, really engage with the person because of the mask, and they were really quite frightened. So these babies have grown up or been around people wearing masks all the time, and how much that impacts their development. But also just from not seeing family, you know, that they're kind of holding and being clingy to their parents and not wanting to go to others has also kind of something that I've seen as well. So it does mention here about the consequences of reduced social contact due to social distancing. Will take time to properly understand and rectify. So others, like 31% increase in the total number of serious incident notifications for babies in their first year are already sadly quite known as well. So we have seen an increase in that. We know the pandemic has placed unprecedented pressure on families as well as those delivering services for parents and their babies. So at the first lockdown, many services were suspended, closed, moved, and the models were changed to because of social distancing. Lots of staff were redeployed, and in our team we had 6 staff who were redeployed to another service. So our numbers were really down. There was a lot more work to do, and then actually we did keep our face-to-face visits for the most vulnerable, but we moved online, digital, and there were lots of issues around that as well. People not having access to technology, and just some of the other risks. If you see somebody on a video that you don't know what's going on around them, you really can't get a full idea of that person's kind of situation. So health visitors went through similar sort of things, and social workers and other Start for Life practitioners were redeployed, moved to wards to kind of meet the demands there. And caseloads went through the roof, I think, because of that. In addition to loss of services, parents reported feelings of loneliness and a loss of social connection as a result. The review heard that peer support is vital for everyone, and the loss of this is likely to have had a significant impact on the emotional well-being of parents and carers. And we're seeing the impact of that now as things are opening up. Women are wanting to come and access support and see us. And this is what they're talking about. They've not had that kind of opportunity that we would have had to take their children to clubs and groups and just meet other mums and other families. So it's been really, really difficult for them. There's been a lot of effort to ensure that babies are not forgotten. Health visitors have returned to their teams, and professionals and volunteers across the country have found new and innovative ways to deliver services safely. So such as moving them online or changing the way they're delivered. And some of them have been actually better in terms of, well, I was just thinking about our Infant Mental Health Week. If we had done this in a venue, how many people would have been able to come, and actually how many people are able to join online is much easier. There's no traveling, there's no looking for parking, all that sort of stuff. So some of it has been really positive. And again, this says the same thing. There's been a positive uptake of virtual services by families as well. And they've given an example of Parent Talk, which is an online support service provided by Action for Children. They reported a 430% increase in the numbers of parents seeking advice online during the pandemic. So people were adapting and adjusting to finding other ways to get support. But it's not, nothing beats seeing them kind of face to face, really, in their environments. I really like this picture. It's so cute. There's been serious consequences as a result. Babies in Lockdown report. I don't know if many of you have seen that. It was a really, really, really interesting report. The survey of over 5,000 parents of 0 to 2-year-olds found that 9 out of 10 parents and carers experienced higher levels of anxiety during lockdown, and 25% reported concern about their relationship with their baby. And so work has been undertaken to understand the effects of the virus on babies and their carers, and it's not a straightforward issue. It will not be simple to identify the numerous effects or the best way to tackle them. So more research is needed to understand the particular challenges that the pandemic has brought for disabled babies and their parents. Lots of organisations have started important work to study the aspects of the problem. For example, a study into the effects of social distancing policies on children's cognitive development is being carried out by a collaboration of universities, and I think we may hear about those things soon. And then the review considered that the government and Start for Life sector should pay close attention to research findings in the area, as it is essential we understand the lessons from this unprecedented time in our nation's history. And so as part of the review, 6 action areas were identified, and these are those. if you do go and look at the actual document, this goes into so much more detail, and I didn't do that here because we would be here till probably next week, because there's so much in there. It's really a really good document to look at everything that they want to try and achieve. But this is the basic 6 areas that they are focusing on here at the moment. And I think that is it. It's a bit of a quick end. So I hope that was okay. It was just a bit of a snapshot of what's kind of out there and what it's all about. I do tend to waffle, so I apologise for that. Is there any questions or anything anyone wants to know or say?